In the early 20th century, researchers discovered biological treatments that showed remarkable success against infectious diseases. These weren't theoretical approaches or experimental protocols. They were proven therapies with documented cure rates that surpassed anything available today. Patients who faced certain death from bacterial infections recovered completely using simple, natural treatments that cost virtually nothing to produce. One such breakthrough emerged from the work of researchers studying viruses that specifically target bacteria. These natural biological agents, found everywhere in nature, demonstrated an extraordinary ability to seek out and destroy harmful bacteria while leaving healthy tissue completely unaffected. Clinical trials showed success rates exceeding 90% for conditions that were otherwise fatal. Doctors around the world began using these treatments, saving countless lives with what appeared to be nature's own targeted antibiotics. The therapy was elegant in its simplicity. Medical professionals would identify the specific bacteria causing an infection, then introduce the corresponding natural virus that preyed on that particular strain. The biological agent would multiply, eliminate the infection, and then disappear naturally once its target was destroyed. No side effects, no resistance development, and no ongoing treatment required. Patients recovered fully and permanently from infections that would have killed them using conventional approaches. Military medical records from major conflicts show these biological treatments achieving remarkable results. Soldiers with infected wounds that would normally require amputation were completely healed. Conditions that decimated armies in previous wars became manageable with simple applications of these natural therapeutic agents. The technology worked so effectively that entire medical corps began adopting it as their primary treatment for battlefield infections. Then everything changed. A new class of chemical compounds emerged that could be mass-produced in factories, stored indefinitely, and standardized for broad-spectrum use. Unlike the biological treatments that required skilled identification and customized application, these chemical alternatives offered a one-size-fits-all approach that could be manufactured and distributed on an industrial scale. More importantly for business interests, these synthetic compounds could be patented, creating exclusive monopolies and guaranteed profit streams. The biological treatments faced an impossible competitive disadvantage. They occurred naturally and couldn't be patented. Each application required trained microbiologists to identify specific bacterial strains and select appropriate natural agents. The treatments had limited shelf life and needed careful storage. There was no way to create a profitable, standardized product from something that nature provided freely and that required individualized medical expertise to implement effectively. Within a few decades, the biological approach virtually disappeared from medical practice in developed nations. Research funding evaporated as pharmaceutical companies invested billions in chemical alternatives. Medical schools stopped teaching the biological methods. Regulatory agencies began requiring expensive clinical trials that no company would fund for unpatentable treatments. The natural therapies that had saved countless lives were systematically erased from medical knowledge, replaced by synthetic alternatives that generated substantial ongoing revenue. Meanwhile, in regions where economic systems didn't require medical treatments to generate profit, researchers continued developing and refining the biological approaches. Their medical facilities treated thousands of patients annually with continued high success rates, documenting results that far exceeded what chemical alternatives achieved. However, medical literature in profit-driven healthcare systems ignored or dismissed this work, claiming research from non-commercial medical systems was inherently unreliable. By the time antibiotic resistance emerged as a global crisis, the knowledge needed to implement effective biological alternatives had been largely lost in developed nations. The treatments that could have prevented the rise of superbugs had been abandoned not because they failed, but because they succeeded too well at too low a cost. Medical professionals trained exclusively in chemical approaches had never learned about biological alternatives that remained highly effective against resistant bacterial strains. Today, as antibiotic resistance threatens to return medicine to pre-industrial mortality rates, the biological treatments remain largely unavailable in developed healthcare systems. Regulatory frameworks designed for chemical drugs cannot accommodate living biological agents that must be customized to specific infections. Clinical trials would cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and no pharmaceutical company will fund studies for treatments they cannot patent and monopolize. The few patients who gain access to biological treatments through compassionate use programs experience the same remarkable recovery rates that were documented a century ago. The technology works exactly as it always did. The barrier isn't scientific or medical, but economic and regulatory. A treatment that works too well at too low a cost cannot survive in healthcare systems built on generating revenue from ongoing disease management. This pharmaceutical case illustrates the broader pattern that affected numerous breakthrough technologies throughout the 20th century. Industries built on scarcity, ongoing consumption, and centralized control cannot tolerate innovations that provide abundance, permanent solutions, or decentralized alternatives. The more thoroughly a technology solves fundamental problems, the more violently existing systems react to suppress it. The suppression operates through multiple mechanisms that make it nearly invisible to casual observation. Funding disappears gradually rather than dramatically. Research programs are redirected toward less threatening applications. Scientists face career pressure to abandon promising lines of inquiry. Regulatory barriers emerge that make innovative approaches prohibitively expensive to pursue. Media coverage focuses on theoretical limitations while ignoring documented successes. What makes this pattern particularly insidious is that the suppression often occurs just as technologies transition from experimental to commercially viable. Researchers spend years or decades proving their innovations work, overcoming technical challenges and demonstrating real-world applications. Then, precisely when the technology is ready for widespread deployment, the obstacles appear. It's as if there's a systematic monitoring system that identifies genuinely disruptive innovations and activates countermeasures before they can reach the public. The timing suggests that suppression isn't random market forces or bureaucratic incompetence. It's a coordinated response by established industries that recognize existential threats to their business models. These industries have the resources to influence regulatory agencies, fund opposing research, acquire and bury patents, and create economic conditions that make innovative approaches appear unviable. Understanding this pattern changes how we interpret technological progress. Innovation isn't limited by scientific possibility or engineering constraints. It's controlled by economic permission. Breakthrough technologies exist and have been proven to work, but they remain hidden because they threaten the wrong interests. The world we inhabit isn't the world we could have. It's the world that certain powers have decided we're allowed to have. The implications extend far beyond any single industry or technology. If systematic suppression has prevented deployment of effective medical treatments, revolutionary materials, abundant energy sources, and transformative transportation systems, then human civilization is operating far below its potential. Problems we assume are unsolvable may have been solved decades ago by innovations that were deliberately buried to protect existing profit structures. This realization forces us to reconsider fundamental assumptions about progress, scarcity, and human limitation. Perhaps the greatest challenges facing humanity aren't technical problems waiting for solutions, but solved problems waiting for the economic and political conditions that would allow their implementation. The automotive industry provides another striking example of this suppression pattern. During the economic turmoil of the 1930s, visionary industrialists began exploring alternatives to traditional steel construction for vehicles. The motivation was partly economic, but also environmental. Forward-thinking manufacturers recognized that petroleum-based materials and metal production created unnecessary pollution while depleting finite resources. One particular innovator became fascinated with agricultural materials that could replace manufactured components. His research team discovered that certain plant fibers, when processed and combined with natural resins, created composite materials with extraordinary properties. These biological composites weren't just environmentally friendly alternatives to conventional materials. They were actually superior in most measurable characteristics. Testing revealed that panels made from these plant-based composites demonstrated impact resistance 10 times greater than steel. The biological materials absorbed collision energy rather than transferring it, potentially saving lives in accidents. Weight reductions of 60% compared to metal construction meant dramatically improved fuel efficiency. Most remarkably, the plant-based panels showed no corrosion or deterioration over time, unlike steel components that rusted and required constant maintenance. The environmental advantages were equally impressive. The agricultural materials grew rapidly without requiring pesticides or intensive cultivation. Processing plant fibers into composite panels consumed far less energy than steel production. At the end of a vehicle's useful life, the biological components would decompose naturally rather than creating permanent waste. The entire life cycle from growing raw materials to disposal was environmentally sustainable. Public demonstrations of vehicles constructed with these biological composites drew enormous attention. Film footage exists of the industrialists using heavy tools to strike the plant-based panels, showing how they absorbed impacts that would have dented or punctured steel. The demonstrations proved that agricultural materials could create vehicles that were stronger, lighter, safer, and more environmentally responsible than conventional construction. Manufacturing plans were developed to transition automotive production toward these sustainable materials. Land was purchased for cultivating the necessary crops. Other manufacturers watched with interest, recognizing the potential to revolutionize their industry while supporting agricultural communities. The implications extended beyond automotive applications. Construction, aerospace, and consumer goods could all benefit from strong, lightweight, biodegradable materials derived from renewable crops. Then regulatory changes effectively eliminated the agricultural materials from consideration. New legislation imposed prohibitive taxes and restrictions on the specific crops needed for composite production. The laws made no distinction between different varieties of the plant, treating industrial applications the same as other uses. Growing the necessary agricultural materials became legally and economically impossible due to regulatory barriers that had nothing to do with automotive safety or performance. The industrialist was forced to abandon the biological composite program despite its proven superiority. Without domestic agricultural supplies, manufacturing became impossible. Imported materials were prohibitively expensive and unreliable. The entire research program was terminated just as it was ready for commercial production. After global conflicts redirected industrial capacity toward military production, civilian automotive innovation essentially stopped. When peacetime manufacturing resumed, petroleum-based plastics had become the standard alternative to steel. Chemical companies had developed integrated supply chains that controlled raw materials from oil extraction through finished products. This vertical integration created economic incentives that made biological alternatives appear uncompetitive. The petroleum plastic industry offered something that agricultural materials couldn't provide: complete control over supply chains, patentable formulations, and materials that degraded predictably to ensure ongoing replacement demand. Biological composites that lasted indefinitely and came from decentralized agricultural sources would have disrupted this profitable system of controlled scarcity and planned obsolescence. Modern rediscovery of plant-based composite materials has confirmed every advantage that 1930s researchers documented. Contemporary testing shows the same superior strength, reduced weight, and environmental benefits. However, these materials remain niche products far more expensive than petroleum alternatives due to lack of manufacturing scale and continued regulatory complexity in many regions. The agricultural composite story demonstrates how regulatory capture can eliminate superior technologies before they reach commercial deployment. Industries threatened by innovation don't necessarily oppose the technology directly. Instead, they influence legislation and regulatory frameworks to create conditions where innovative approaches become practically impossible to implement, regardless of their technical superiority. This pattern appears repeatedly across different sectors and decades. Revolutionary building materials that last centuries get replaced by products requiring constant maintenance. Transportation systems that could move people faster than aircraft while using minimal energy get defunded just as they prove commercially viable. Water purification technologies that could eliminate global scarcity face regulatory barriers that prevent deployment despite perfect laboratory performance. The agricultural case also reveals how suppression operates through seemingly unrelated policy changes. The legislation that eliminated plant-based automotive materials wasn't specifically targeting the automotive industry. It appeared to address completely different social concerns. However, the practical effect was to make innovative manufacturing approaches impossible, protecting existing industrial interests while appearing to serve other purposes. This indirect approach makes suppression nearly invisible to public scrutiny. Policymakers can claim they're addressing legitimate social issues while simultaneously protecting established industries from disruptive competition. The connection between regulatory changes and technological suppression becomes apparent only through careful historical analysis that most people never conduct. Understanding these indirect mechanisms helps explain why so many promising innovations disappear without obvious explanations. Researchers and inventors often don't recognize that their technical success has triggered systematic opposition. They interpret funding cuts, regulatory barriers, and market obstacles as normal business challenges rather than coordinated suppression efforts. The timing of these obstacles provides the clearest evidence of deliberate intervention. Technologies can operate in experimental phases for years without interference. Opposition emerges precisely when innovations transition from laboratory curiosities to commercially threatening alternatives. This pattern suggests sophisticated monitoring systems that identify genuinely disruptive technologies and activate countermeasures before they can achieve market penetration. Educational institutions play a crucial role in this suppression system. Engineering and scientific curricula gradually eliminate references to suppressed technologies. Students learn only about approaches that support existing industrial structures. Alternative methodologies that proved superior in historical applications simply vanish from academic knowledge. New generations of professionals never learn that better solutions once existed and were deliberately abandoned. This educational component ensures that suppression becomes self-perpetuating. Each generation accepts current technological limitations as fundamental constraints rather than artificially imposed restrictions. Problems that were solved decades ago are treated as unsolved challenges requiring new research. Resources get wasted, reinventing solutions that already exist but have been systematically erased from professional knowledge. The psychological impact of this educational manipulation cannot be overstated. When people believe that current technologies represent the best available options, they don't search for alternatives. Innovation energy gets channeled toward incremental improvements of existing approaches rather than revolutionary departures that could threaten established interests. Breaking free from this psychological conditioning requires recognizing that technological progress isn't a natural evolutionary process. It's a managed system designed to protect existing economic structures while creating the illusion of advancement. Real innovation often means rediscovering suppressed technologies and understanding why they were eliminated despite their superior performance. The evidence suggests that human civilization possesses technological capabilities far beyond what current industries acknowledge. Revolutionary solutions to major challenges exist and have been proven to work. They remain hidden not because of technical limitations, but because of economic and political systems that profit from maintaining artificial scarcity and technological dependence. Recognizing this reality changes everything about how we approach global challenges. Instead of assuming that problems require new innovations, we should investigate whether solutions already exist but have been systematically suppressed. The breakthrough we need might not be ahead of us. It might be behind us, buried in historical records and forgotten research programs that were terminated when they worked too well. Too well. The nutritional security industry reveals perhaps the most disturbing example of suppression targeting solutions that work too effectively. In regions where malnutrition devastates communities, researchers have repeatedly identified natural resources that could eliminate dietary deficiencies completely. These aren't theoretical solutions or complex interventions requiring massive infrastructure. They're simple, locally available plants that provide comprehensive nutrition while growing with minimal resources. One particular tree species demonstrated extraordinary nutritional properties that challenged everything the international aid community assumed about addressing hunger. Laboratory analysis revealed that the leaves contained vitamin concentrations far exceeding common food sources. The calcium content surpassed dairy products, vitamin levels exceeded citrus fruits, and protein quality matched animal sources. Most remarkably, small daily consumption could meet virtually all human nutritional requirements. Field trials in affected regions showed dramatic results. Children suffering from severe malnutrition recovered within weeks when given preparations made from these leaves. Growth rates normalized, immune function improved, and cognitive development accelerated. Villages that incorporated the plant into their regular diet experienced virtually eliminated malnutrition despite ongoing food scarcity. The tree offered additional benefits that made it nearly perfect for addressing nutritional security. It grew rapidly in poor soil conditions, required minimal water, and thrived in climates where traditional crops struggled. Every part of the plant provided useful applications. Seeds could purify contaminated water sources, removing harmful bacteria and making safe drinking water available without expensive filtration systems. Multiple international organizations documented these remarkable properties and began promoting cultivation in affected regions. Training programs taught communities how to grow, harvest, and prepare the nutritional leaves. Success stories emerged from dozens of countries where villages achieved nutritional independence using nothing more than locally grown plants. Then something changed in how these programs operated. Organizations that had enthusiastically promoted the trees began shifting focus toward other interventions. Funding for cultivation programs decreased despite documented success. Research grants for studying the plants dried up even as evidence of their effectiveness accumulated. The shift coincided with increased commercial interest in marketing the plants as premium health products in wealthy nations. Companies filed patents on processing methods and extraction techniques. Marketing campaigns promoted expensive supplements derived from the same leaves that could grow freely in affected regions. What had been a solution for nutritional independence became a commodity for profit. Regulatory barriers began appearing in various countries. Some regions banned importation of seeds, citing invasive species concerns, despite the plants having grown in those areas for centuries. Others required expensive certification processes for any products derived from the trees, making small-scale local production economically impossible. The pattern revealed how solutions that work too well threaten entire industries built around managing problems rather than solving them. Nutritional independence eliminated demand for fortified foods, vitamin supplements, and ongoing aid programs. Villages growing their own comprehensive nutrition sources didn't need external interventions or commercial products. International aid organizations discovered that successful programs actually reduced their funding opportunities. Donors preferred supporting ongoing interventions rather than one-time solutions that eliminated the need for continued assistance. Permanent fixes didn't generate the recurring revenue streams that sustained aid bureaucracies. The suppression operated through redirecting attention rather than direct opposition. Organizations simply stopped promoting the trees while shifting toward other approaches that required ongoing support and commercial products. The plants continued growing and providing nutrition for communities that already knew about them, but large-scale programs to spread this knowledge were quietly discontinued. Contemporary nutritional research has repeatedly confirmed the extraordinary properties these plants possess. Modern analysis validates every benefit that historical studies documented. However, the trees remain underutilized in regions where malnutrition persists, while expensive supplements derived from the same plants sell for premium prices in health food stores. The agricultural sector provides another clear illustration of how superior solutions get buried when they threaten established business models. Throughout the 20th century, farmers dealing with depleted soil discovered that certain natural amendments could restore fertility without expensive chemical inputs. These weren't complex agricultural techniques or experimental approaches. They were simple applications of naturally occurring materials that had been used successfully for generations. Researchers studying soil degradation found that finely ground mineral rock could provide comprehensive nutrition for crops while rebuilding soil structure. The approach addressed the fundamental problem with chemical agriculture, which supplied only a few nutrients while depleting the dozens of minerals that plants require for optimal health. Rock-based amendments provided the full spectrum of minerals that natural weathering would supply over geological timescales. Field comparisons showed remarkable differences between conventionally managed and mineral-amended soils. Crops grown with rock amendments demonstrated superior pest resistance without pesticides, higher yields despite reduced chemical inputs, and dramatically improved nutritional content. Most importantly, the soil itself became healthier over time rather than increasingly depleted. The method was extraordinarily economical. Rock dust was a waste product from quarrying operations, available at minimal cost. Application required no special equipment or techniques. The minerals didn't wash away like water-soluble fertilizers, providing benefits for multiple growing seasons from a single application. Farmers who implemented these mineral amendments reported consistent improvements across multiple crop types and growing conditions. Comparative studies showed yield increases, reduced input costs, and improved crop quality. Soil analysis confirmed that mineral content increased over time as natural processes slowly released nutrients from the rock particles. Agricultural institutions began investigating these results and confirmed the effectiveness of mineral soil amendments. Research papers documented the superior performance and economic advantages. Academic conferences featured presentations on rock-based fertility restoration. The approach appeared ready for widespread adoption throughout agriculture. Then opposition emerged from chemical fertilizer manufacturers who recognized the existential threat to their industry. If farmers could restore soil fertility with waste rock dust, the market for expensive synthetic fertilizers would collapse. Industry-funded research began questioning the effectiveness of mineral amendments, claiming the nutrients were locked in crystalline structures that plants couldn't access. Academic opposition intensified as universities receiving funding from chemical companies published studies dismissing rock amendment approaches. Agricultural extension services stopped recommending mineral applications despite documented farmer success. The scientific consensus shifted against natural soil restoration methods in favor of continued chemical dependency. Educational institutions gradually eliminated mineral amendment techniques from their curricula. New generations of agricultural professionals learned only chemical approaches to soil management. Traditional knowledge about natural fertility restoration was systematically erased from agricultural education. Farmers who continued using mineral amendments were dismissed as backwards or unscientific. The suppression was so effective that soil depletion became accepted as normal, requiring ever-increasing chemical applications to maintain yields. Nutritional content of food crops declined measurably as soils became increasingly minerally depleted. Problems that mineral amendments could have prevented were treated as inevitable consequences of intensive agriculture. Modern organic farmers have rediscovered rock-based soil restoration and achieved the same remarkable results documented throughout the 20th century. Contemporary research confirms every advantage that historical studies showed. However, mainstream agriculture remains committed to chemical approaches despite their obvious limitations and environmental consequences. The agricultural case demonstrates how industries can reshape scientific consensus to protect their markets. When research threatens profitable approaches, funding patterns shift to support opposing studies while suppressing confirmatory evidence. Over time, this creates artificial scientific consensus that protects commercial interests rather than advancing knowledge. Infrastructure development reveals another dimension of technological suppression that affects entire civilizations. Throughout the mid-20th century, engineers developed construction materials with properties that could revolutionize building and infrastructure. These weren't theoretical improvements or marginal advances. They were breakthrough materials that lasted centuries instead of decades while requiring minimal maintenance. Researchers discovered that certain biological processes could be embedded within concrete to create self-repairing building materials. When cracks developed from settling or stress, dormant organisms would activate and produce limestone that filled the gaps automatically. The biological concrete healed itself without human intervention, creating structures that could theoretically last for centuries. Laboratory testing confirmed the remarkable properties of these living building materials. Deliberately cracked samples exposed to water showed complete crack healing within weeks. The repaired areas were often stronger than the original concrete because the biological limestone formed dense crystalline structures. Repeated crack-heal cycles demonstrated that the self-repair process could continue indefinitely. Field trials using biological concrete in actual infrastructure projects validated the laboratory results. Parking structures, bridges and buildings constructed with self-healing materials showed no crack development over extended periods. Conventional concrete sections in the same projects exhibited normal deterioration, while biological sections remained intact. The economic implications were revolutionary. Infrastructure deterioration costs billions annually in inspection, repair, and replacement activities. Buildings and bridges with centuries-long lifespans would eliminate most maintenance expenses while dramatically reducing resource consumption. Construction could focus on new projects rather than constant reconstruction of deteriorating infrastructure. Environmental benefits were equally significant. Concrete production generates substantial carbon emissions through limestone heating and cement manufacturing. If structures lasted 10 times longer, the environmental impact of construction would decrease proportionally. Resources currently consumed in constant repair and replacement could be redirected toward other applications. Major construction companies initially showed strong interest in biological concrete technology. Pilot projects were funded and expanded trials were planned. Research papers documented successful field applications. The technology appeared ready for commercial deployment throughout the construction industry. Then obstacles emerged that prevented widespread adoption. While biological concrete demonstrated superior long-term performance, initial costs exceeded conventional materials. Construction contracts awarded to lowest bidders automatically excluded the superior technology despite its lower life cycle costs. Competitive bidding systems couldn't account for century-long durability advantages. More fundamentally, the entire construction industry depended on ongoing maintenance and replacement activities. Inspection companies, repair contractors, and material suppliers generated revenue from infrastructure deterioration. Materials that lasted indefinitely would eliminate massive ongoing income streams throughout the construction ecosystem. Regulatory barriers compounded the economic obstacles. Building codes didn't accommodate self-healing materials or century-long design lifespans. Approval processes for innovative construction materials were expensive and time-consuming. Insurance and liability frameworks couldn't address structures expected to last longer than the companies that built them. The biological concrete remained available for specialty applications, but never achieved widespread deployment. Construction continued using conventional materials, requiring predictable maintenance and replacement cycles. The industry preserved its business model based on planned obsolescence, rather than adopting superior technology that would reduce long-term profitability. The pattern extends across multiple infrastructure technologies, that could transform civilization but threaten existing economic structures. Transportation systems capable of moving people faster than aircraft, while using minimal energy, face opposition from industries built on expensive, inefficient travel. Water purification technologies that could eliminate global scarcity encounter resistance from utilities profiting from water shortage pricing. Each suppressed technology reveals the same dynamic. Solutions that work too well challenge business models based on artificial scarcity, planned obsolescence, and ongoing consumption. Industries threatened by permanent solutions mobilize resources to prevent deployment of technologies that would eliminate their revenue streams. The cumulative effect of this systematic suppression is a civilization operating far below its technological potential. Problems we assume are unsolvable have been solved repeatedly by innovations that were buried to protect existing profit structures. Energy abundance, material durability, transportation efficiency, and resource sustainability are achievable using technologies that already exist but remain hidden from public deployment. Understanding this pattern changes how we interpret technological progress and global challenges. Innovation isn't limited by scientific knowledge or engineering capabilities. It's controlled by economic permission systems that determine which technologies reach the public and which remain buried in classified archives or forgotten research programs. The implications force us to reconsider fundamental assumptions about human limitation and technological possibility. Perhaps the greatest obstacles to human advancement aren't technical problems waiting for solutions, but solved problems waiting for economic and political conditions that would allow their implementation. The future we could have may depend less on developing new technologies than on recovering suppressed innovations that were eliminated when they worked too well. Energy systems provide perhaps the most revealing example of how breakthrough technologies get eliminated precisely when they prove most effective. During the mid-20th century, researchers exploring alternative power generation discovered that ocean temperature differences could provide virtually unlimited clean electricity. This wasn't theoretical physics or experimental speculation. This was working technology that operated successfully for years before being systematically destroyed. The principle behind this ocean energy system was elegantly simple. Tropical waters maintain consistent temperature differences between surface and deep layers. Warm surface water could vaporize working fluids with low boiling points, driving turbines to generate electricity. Cold, deep water would then condense the vapor back to liquid, completing a continuous cycle. The ocean provided both the heat source and cooling system for perpetual operation. Experimental facilities demonstrated remarkable performance characteristics. Unlike solar panels that stop working at night or wind turbines that require specific weather conditions, ocean thermal systems operated continuously regardless of surface conditions. The power output remained steady 24 hours daily, providing true baseline electricity generation without backup systems or energy storage requirements. Laboratory prototypes successfully generated substantial electrical output using nothing more than seawater temperature differences. Engineers calculated that large-scale installations could produce hundreds of megawatts continuously. The ocean represented an inexhaustible energy reservoir that could power entire regions without fuel consumption, emissions, or environmental disruption. Field trials validated these calculations with actual ocean-based installations. Floating platforms equipped with thermal conversion equipment generated clean electricity for extended periods. The systems operated reliably in open ocean conditions, demonstrating that the technology could scale to commercial power generation levels. Environmental impact assessments revealed additional benefits beyond clean power production. The cold, deep water brought to the surface during operation contained nutrients that enhanced marine productivity. Ocean thermal installations could simultaneously generate electricity and support aquaculture operations, creating integrated systems that improved rather than degraded marine ecosystems. Economic analysis showed that ocean thermal power could compete directly with fossil fuel generation. Operating costs were minimal, since seawater provided both heat and cooling without fuel purchases. Maintenance requirements were modest compared to conventional power plants. The technology offered genuine energy independence for coastal regions with access to deep ocean waters. Multiple energy companies expressed serious interest in commercial development. Government agencies funded expanded research programs. International organizations studied potential applications for energy-poor regions. The technology appeared ready for rapid deployment throughout tropical ocean areas, where billions of people lacked reliable electricity access. Then funding disappeared almost overnight. Research budgets were slashed from substantial levels to virtually nothing within a single fiscal year. Experimental facilities were shut down despite successful operation. Technical staff was laid off and research programs were terminated just as the technology approached commercial viability. Official explanations cited budget constraints and shifting priorities. However, the timing revealed a different story. Ocean thermal energy funding was eliminated precisely when successful demonstrations proved the technology could threaten conventional power generation. The research succeeded too completely, making continued suppression necessary to protect existing energy industries. Analysis of the political dynamics reveals why ocean thermal energy posed such a serious threat. Fossil fuel companies recognized that unlimited clean ocean power could eliminate demand for coal, natural gas, and oil in electricity generation. Utility companies opposed technology that enabled distributed power generation, bypassing centralized grid infrastructure they controlled. The economic implications extended beyond energy companies. Ocean thermal systems could provide energy independence for developing nations, eliminating their dependence on energy imports and foreign debt. Regions with access to deep ocean waters could become energy exporters rather than importers, fundamentally altering global economic relationships. Financial institutions that profited from energy scarcity and infrastructure loans had incentives to prevent abundant clean power from becoming available. International development programs that generated revenue from energy projects would lose funding if simple ocean thermal systems could provide unlimited electricity at minimal cost. The suppression operated through multiple channels simultaneously. Research funding dried up across different agencies and programs. Technical personnel found their careers redirected toward less threatening energy technologies. Academic institutions shifted focus away from ocean thermal research despite its documented success. Patent applications related to ocean thermal energy faced unusual delays and complications in approval processes. Licensing requirements created barriers for commercial development. Environmental impact studies were required despite the technology's obvious environmental benefits, adding years of delay and millions in costs to any deployment attempts. The few nations that continued ocean thermal research found themselves isolated from international cooperation and funding. Technology transfer restrictions prevented sharing of innovations. Export controls limited equipment availability. Diplomatic pressure discouraged continued development of systems that could provide energy independence. Today, decades after successful demonstrations, ocean thermal energy remains virtually unknown to the public despite its proven effectiveness. Billions are invested in intermittent renewable sources that require expensive storage systems, while technology for continuous clean power sits unused. The ocean energy systems work exactly as they always did, but political and economic barriers prevent their deployment. The medical industry reveals another dimension of suppression targeting treatments that cure diseases too effectively. During the early 20th century, researchers discovered that stimulating immune system responses could eliminate cancers that conventional treatments couldn't address. These weren't experimental therapies or unproven approaches. They were documented medical interventions with remarkable success rates. The immune stimulation approach worked by introducing controlled bacterial infections near tumor sites. Patients developed powerful immune responses to fight the bacterial challenge, and their activated immune systems simultaneously attacked cancer cells. The treatment triggered natural healing mechanisms rather than trying to destroy tumors with external interventions. Clinical records from major medical institutions documented extraordinary results. Patients with advanced cancers that were considered terminal experienced complete remission after immune stimulation treatments. Some cases showed tumors disappearing entirely within weeks of treatment initiation. Long-term follow-up confirmed that many patients remained cancer-free for decades. The treatment was remarkably safe compared to surgical, radiation, or chemical approaches. Patients experienced temporary fever and immune activation symptoms, but rarely suffered the devastating side effects associated with conventional cancer treatments. Quality of life remained high throughout treatment, and patients often felt healthier after therapy than before cancer diagnosis. Medical professionals who used immune stimulation reported success rates far exceeding anything achieved with surgery, radiation, or early chemotherapy treatments. The approach worked particularly well for certain cancer types that responded poorly to conventional interventions. Some physicians achieved cure rates approaching 50% for cancers that other treatments couldn't address effectively. The technique required considerable medical skill and individualized treatment protocols. Doctors needed to carefully manage immune responses, adjusting bacterial preparations based on each patient's condition and response patterns. Treatment duration and intensity varied significantly between patients and cancer types. These 10 cases represent more than historical curiosities or isolated incidents of bureaucratic incompetence. They reveal a systematic pattern of technological suppression that operates across industries, decades, and nations. Each innovation succeeded on its technical merits, solved real problems effectively, and demonstrated clear advantages over existing alternatives. Yet each was eliminated not because it failed, but because it worked too well. The pattern is undeniable. Revolutionary medical treatments that cure diseases permanently get replaced by expensive, ongoing therapies. Building materials that last centuries are abandoned for products requiring constant replacement. Energy systems that provide unlimited clean power face systematic defunding, just as they prove commercially viable. Agricultural methods that restore soil fertility naturally are buried by industries selling chemical dependencies. What unites these suppressed technologies isn't scientific impossibility, but economic threat. Each innovation challenged business models built on artificial scarcity, planned obsolescence, and ongoing consumption. Industries that profit from problems persisting cannot tolerate solutions that work too completely. The more thoroughly a technology solves fundamental challenges, the more violently existing systems react to eliminate it. This isn't conspiracy theory speculation. This is documented history backed by scientific papers, government records, and first-hand accounts. The evidence shows that human civilization possesses technological capabilities far beyond what current industries acknowledge. Revolutionary solutions to major challenges exist and have been proven to work repeatedly. They remain hidden not because of technical limitations, but because of economic and political systems that profit from maintaining technological dependence and artificial limitation. The implications force us to reconsider everything we assume about progress and human potential. Perhaps the greatest obstacles to human advancement aren't technical problems waiting for solutions, but solved problems waiting for the economic and political conditions that would allow their implementation. The future we could have may depend less on developing new technologies than on recovering suppressed innovations that were eliminated when they threatened the wrong interests. The breakthrough we need might not be ahead of us. It might be behind us, buried in classified archives and forgotten research programs that work too well to be allowed to survive.